And the topic is mentor or supervisor or both. And the big idea is to think about your own parenting, to reflect and think about which role you're in. A mentor is someone that sort of, we get a mentor at any stage in our life, and we lean upon them for guidance. A supervisor is someone who's a boss. Okay, so that's the real purpose of this series, is to reflect upon the different roles we have in our children's lives as parents, and encouraging you to think about being more of a mentor if possible. So again, I'm going to walk you through it. Let's get going. So the big idea here, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Here we go. Okay, so today's agenda today, obviously being the first of the three, we're going to talk about Torah theories of adolescence, developmental theories, and how this knowledge can really empower you, and to think about it in that way. Now, this is a thing that Stephen Covey of the famous 7 Habits talks about. Begin with the end in mind, which is whenever you're starting something, think about where you'd like to be at the end. And the connotation here is that I listed 4 different scenarios. Number 1 is my son doesn't want to go to shul with me any longer. These are actual real questions that parents posed to me over the years. But obviously it's something that could be any parent at any time. 2, everything is a negotiation. 3, scenario 3 is I just can't figure these teenagers out. They go from hot to cold in a second, and it's just so confusing because they do this, that, and the other thing, and it just makes us crazy the way they go back from one to the other. They volunteer with developmentally disabled kids, and sometimes I can't get them to help me bring groceries in from the car. And scenario 4 is we used to be very close, my daughter and I. Now she's distant, and then all of a sudden, boom, out of nowhere, she's searching for affection. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster. Okay, so I just put this at the beginning. This overall series is designed to do theory and then practice. To first do a theory, which is understanding the research, the background, why they're doing what they're doing, and to really, we call it deep dive. But I want to do this in mind, understanding that there are, of course, practical applications to all of this. So I wanted to make it more practical by starting this in the first place with these scenarios, with the different scenarios that you'll come up with as we go on. So this is an analogy that I give about I call it the wet hands analogy, and that is that if you understand electronics, and you're brought up in a developed country, in a first world country, we call it. So if you do that, if you come out of a shower, you wash your hands and you plug in an appliance. So right away you'll get a jolt, and you'll know you did something wrong. You'll know why it happened. The same thing that happens with someone in a third world country who's never seen electricity. They have the same pain, but they don't know why it happened. And to some degrees, it's more frightening and it's more confusing because they don't even understand. Maybe every Sunday morning they're going to get a shock at the same time. Maybe they did something wrong. Maybe in our turn, they need to check their mezuzahs to see what happened. Why did this happen to them? So the thinking is that once you understand something, understanding is power. This is an actual, if you remember, before I put up those scenarios, so this is an actual question that someone presented to me in a parenting class. Can we daven in a different shul? My kid wanted to daven with me. We always daven together. We used to love shul. Now all of a sudden he wants to go to a different shul. He says that the davening is too slow in my shul. The kiddush is lousy, and nobody talks in shul. I want to go to a different place. And Gedalia is asking, what should I do? One of the 4 scenarios. Teenagers, okay, our eldest child is in 10th grade. Now everything is just a negotiation. This was a letter that I wrote to a letter from a teenage girl to their parents explaining their life. Again, like a lot of these things, I'm going to skip over them now, and you're welcome to go to either the YouTube of the original class, or you can go over this. This will also be on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and you can look it up more in detail. The big idea is that adolescents are transitioning, and transition brings stress. And because they don't know, in that letter I wrote, the girls telling the parents, How would you feel if you had to move to a new country and you didn't know anyone there, and you were just, you didn't know what your job would be, if you have a job, if you have friends? Well, I don't know any of those things in my own life. So in addition to some of the research that I'll be showing you later about the way their brains develop and the way about other parts in their life that cause stress, it's also, this factor also causes stress because they're transitioning from your home to an uncertain future. Now, again, this doesn't make it easier, it just helps explain it. And this is something you'll hear from me throughout the series. Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, saying, Ani bina li gevura. The series is meant for you to understand things which will automatically give you power in dealing with it. I'm going to skip over some slides. Again, this is a 15-minute drill for each of the sessions. So there are three sets of changes that take place. There's biological, physical changes, intellectual, how they think, how their cognitive ability goes, and there's the whole social emotional in terms of their feelings, how they talk, how their friendships work. These are three completely separate phases that children go through. They're normal, they're healthy, and just like the guy with the electric shock, I would love for you at the other side of this to be able to understand how normal this is and not to feel so perplexed by it. Hopefully you'll have more power, you'll have more gevura as the bina comes in, okay, as we understand. Now, biological needs, talk about, the physical maturity that goes on during adolescence. Cognitive is the neurological changes, limbic system, prefrontal cortex. These are actual changes in their brains as their brains develop. And this is an example. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time. I spent more time on it in the original. This was one of the big pushes forward in understanding the way human minds work. Initially, everybody thought that our brains were just like one lunk, one piece. And then this fellow, this Phineas Gage, worked in the railroad. His frontal lobe, you see this, I'll use the icon here. You see this the spike going through his skull. He got a terrible injury to the front of his brain. And what happened was, immediately, he almost became a teenager overnight. And you read some of again, you go back and look it up again, you can Google search it. What happened was that people described him, again, following the cursor, pre-accident Gage was hardworking, responsible, the most efficient and capable person. And now, if you look at the second paragraph on this slide, he was fitful, irreverent, his cursing, being impossible to deal with, a child in his intellectual capacity, animal passions of a strong man, whereas before he was, he was a foreman. And now they said that he's no longer Gage. He was no longer Gage, meaning he was no longer recognizable as this person that he was before. And obviously, that all goes to show that our children are doing exactly this. The research shows that the prefrontal, that area of their brain, the frontal lobe, is not developed until late teens. It's usually early 20s. Okay, they have social emotional changes, and there are three stages of adolescence. Early adolescence, they go through puberty. Middle adolescence, where they start growing through this, and late adolescence is when they hopefully, emerge on the other side. Again, I'm gonna just go through these slides and talk about them in the big picture. Again, I really, really encourage you to take the time to do the real deep dive, either listen to the sessions or do the research on your own. I just added this in Gemara because especially parents of boys, especially if it's your oldest boy, understand that at this time when they're in this early adolescent stage, right here on the left side, where they're going through all these other physical changes, they're also starting Gemara. Their day gets longer. They come to minyan in the morning. They're preparing for their bar mitzvahs. The general studies, they're like 2.5 hours got added to their day overnight. Just again, understand that as this, it's an overlay of all the other variables. As you're trying to figure out the answer to those questions, those 4 scenarios that we posed at the beginning, it's important that you understand what's going on in their lives and how they're functioning or lack thereof, or the challenges they have, are perfectly normal and predictable and understandable. A little bit of Torah hashkafa here. I would like to suggest that Hashem gave us free choice. Why did Hashem give adults free choice? Forget kids. Hashem gave us free choice because I believe that we're supposed to learn from our mistakes. Hashem didn't want us to be robots. Hashem wanted us to become better people. We become better people, unfortunately, that's the way it works. We become better people by working through our mistakes. I would like to suggest that adolescence is a time, and this might be different than you've been thinking about it till now, and feel free to disagree with me, but I would like to suggest that adolescence is a time where children make their mistakes while they're in our home, and we can help guide them through it. And we'll see in the future about how this relates to everything. Okay, so helping through them, getting them through this, I believe, is our mission as they go through adolescence. Now, on the bottom, these Hebrew words, chayiv b'dinei adam and patur b'dinei shemayim, is, I believe, a fascinating proof to this. We have a halacha and hashkafa in Jewish theology and thought. A child between the ages of 13, I wrote this. This is from a column that I wrote. I'm not going to give you the support, the supporting psukim, but you can look it up. The support for this is that boys between 13 and 20, girls between 12 and 20, they are chayiv b'dinei adam, meaning if they damage, if they break a window, if they destroy property, they're responsible to pay for it. However, if they don't keep Shabbos, or they do something only between them and Hashem, Hashem sort of gives them a waiver. It doesn't mean it's okay if they do it, but they don't get the full punishment that an adult gets. And I would like to suggest, why would you say the Torah is telling you? Now that we know the research on this, it makes perfect sense. The Torah says, look, you can't handle this right now. So I can't let you harm other people. You're big and strong, like Phineas Gage was, right? He had the body of an adult, but he was acting like a child. Hopefully the Bina, understanding this, I hope provides you with the gevura to be able to be more self-confident. And folks, that's so important, because just like any great teacher you had, or any great mentor you had, or, you have a certain sense that they're in control. When people get weak and they don't have control, then they just they don't respond in a good way, and not in a healthy way, because they're rattled. The purpose of this series is to give you the gevura that comes through Bina, through understanding. And here are some questions. How would you deal with those 4 scenarios? How would a supervisor deal with them, a rule maker? And how would a mentor respond to them? And my final point for reflection is, when does your role as a supervisor fade? In the next session, we're going to be learning about Rav Wolbe's Zriya Ubinyan B'Chinuch, planting and building, and how I propose to you that your role as a supervisor, meaning when you're the boss and you give instructions and they have to listen to you, certainly fades over time. I propose that it fades rather quickly. And a mentor is well beyond that, goes well beyond that phase. Okay, so I'm going to go over to session number 2. Just a moment, please. Okay. Just waiting for it to populate. Okay, so that was session number 1. As I said again, while we're waiting for it to load, just understand all of these sessions are there in full on YouTube. I really encourage you to use this as a review or a preview, so to speak, but try to take the time to really study it and review it and get your hands around this whole thinking. I propose to you, and I hope that it'll really change the way you parent. Okay, let's get to module number 2, parenting for the long game. And this is what we alluded to at the end of the first session about the shelf life of a supervisor and a mentor. how this works and what the reality is. Okay. So if you remember, just a moment. If you remember, we started with this during the first session. We had these 4 scenarios. Today, in this session, we're going to actually go through them and show you how this works and why. Now, scenario 1 and 2 are longer, so we're going to do 3 and 4 first because there's more research and explanation to go into the first 2, okay? So teens as walking contradictions. The first one was that I can't figure the kids out. So if you look at the research here, it clearly says that human development, this is in fact normal. They're exploring these different components, and it's in fact predictable that they bounce back and forth. Now, this contradiction part, again, we had number 3 on the bottom left. You find that the contradictions, that's what they are. They're trying to figure out if they want to be a volunteer and altruistic, or they should just make a lot of money, or both. This is all normal. Now, the second thing was about, you know, I can't figure out my child's need for love and affection. And this is called, we call this refueling. This behavior is consistent with 2 and 3-year-olds, tweens, meaning, you know, 10 through, you know, 9, 10 or so, and later on in adolescence. And the idea is that they need to anchor. I gave a really nice example of a few examples that you can refer to video number 2 in length about how this refueling works with a child in a playground, and how it reflects on your kid coming over to you Friday night to snuggle up after you're annoyed with them all day that they haven't really been around to help you. So again, understand that this is a normal part of the process. Now, the shul thing is a little bit more complicated. Why is it, this is scenario 1 now, why is it that my child doesn't want to go to shul with me? And distancing from parents is also normal. Okay, the kids want to be in their rooms by themselves. They don't want to share all the details. If your child was talkative and you know, you got into this amazing habit of really conversing and talking when your daughter was 6 and 8 and 10, and now all of a sudden at 14, it's, you know, whatever, and they run up to their room. That's normal. That distancing. Eventually, hopefully, they get to the other side and they're comfortable because they feel they're, ironically, when they feel they're more in control, they're more comfortable coming back to us. When they don't feel they're in control, they have to announce that they're the boss. Remember I said about, when we were reviewing the last session, I said that when you feel self-confident, when a teacher feels confident, they're able to teach better because they're feel that they're in control. The teachers who yell a lot, or the parents who unfortunately, you know, lose control a little bit, typically don't feel that they're completely in control. And that's what leads to all the stress. Kids don't feel that they're in control really. So they're like that insecure person that has to establish their independence, which is exactly what it says. Again, look it up. Freud talks about it, Piaget, Maslow, others. It's all referenced over here. I remember we said about the wet hands, about remembering things. This was actually a response that I wrote to that, excuse me, the question from Gedalia that asked that question about his son davening in shul with him. And in my response, I actually wrote this without having consulted with Gedalia. Gedalia was kind enough to allow me to use his email address. I put it in the column so people could actually see if it's true that we really didn't discuss this with each other. And if you look at that second line of the response, I wrote there's either beginning the tween stage 9 to 10 or 13 to 14. Why? Because that's when it usually happens. It's perfectly normal. It so happens that the child was 13. And again, that doesn't mean that I'm smarter than anyone. That's the age that I work with. And I've read the research and I know that this is normal. This is a time when children can go through this phase. Now, as a parent, you can decide practically how to handle this. You can negotiate with your child. You can say, you know what, I'll go with you to your shul twice a month and you'll come with me twice. Or I'll go with you, however you work it out. One time you'll go on your own. You do it any way that works for you. You might not want to give up your shul. It's a decision that you make as a parent. But the idea is not to take it personally and not to to have Bina, there are numerous studies that show that parents are much more effective when they feel self-confident, which we spoke about a teacher in class and you as a parent and people having control. So again, all of this is normal. Negotiation is the last thing we're going to cover in this session. Who's the boss? Who's the boss? Who's the boss? And that brings a lot of confusion in the area of parenting adolescents. Why? Because we know that parents are the boss of a 16-year-old. We know that if you have a 22-year-old living at home, he or she is in charge of their own life. You know, hopefully you guide them a little bit, but they're the boss. Who's the boss of a 15-year-old? It's not clear. So that brings a tremendous amount of confusion. And in terms of negotiating and discussing it with them, I have 3 slides here on some really important discussions about parenting styles. That's perhaps going to be the most fundamental issue that we'll be discussing in this session is the 4 various methods of parenting. We have authoritarian. Authoritarian means they're very preoccupied with their own authority. Authoritative is someone that's comfortable being in control, but doesn't have to talk about it a lot. Neglectful, uninvolved, really does neither. And permissive is very into the children, but allows them to do whatever they want. I'll explain what this box is in a moment, but this is just another way of looking at it. Again, this is that's why I call this the short, you know, this is the shallow dive. Review the video, look it over and explore it, or go to the full video. But this is perhaps, if you're a visual learner like me, this might be the easiest, where authoritarian is focused on obedience. Okay, the 1-line sentence here, if you look here, authoritarian on the bottom here is because I said so. So that's how you would look at it, like that, very preoccupied with I'm the boss. Authoritative is they're into their children, understands the developmental phases, but does make demands and says rules. You got to go to sleep at this. I want you to go to sleep at this time. Obviously make exceptions, but there's a bedtime and your homework gets done and you know, you clean up your room. Research and, you know, our own anecdotal experience would say that authoritative is ideal. Permissive is they love their children. We all love our children, meaning they're very into their kids. They're not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about the children, but they're loose as far as the rules go. And unfortunately, uninvolved means that they're really doing very little of this whole parenting thing. Now, if you go back a slide to I'll go back a slide to this, excuse me, to this model here. So if you look where my cursor is, you see the high, this is responsiveness, meaning how into the children are you? Are you responsive to their needs? Do you notice when they need more support or a hug or your attention, or is it working or not, or you're just popping out your rules? So authoritative parents and permissive parents are both very highly responsive to the children's needs. Permissive doesn't enforce the rules that much. So if you look at this other, the left to right one, right, the horizontal one, demandingness, high or low. So permissive are high on responsiveness, but low on demandingness. Authoritative does both well. They're responsive, but they also demand. Authoritarian is very high on the demandingness, but low in terms of what the child needs or where they're up to, because I said so. They set high expectations. They have clear rules. And uninvolved, unfortunately, is almost neglectful. And if you go back to here, the reason I did this DR. This is my own code. You have demandiveness and responsiveness. So capital D means they do that part well, right? Their demandingness is high, but their responsiveness is low. Authoritative, both are high, neglectful, and permissive accordingly. Okay, we're going to wrap up this session by session 2. This is a review of session 2 of 6. Rav Shlomo Wolbe, Zriya Ubinyan B'Chinuch, talks about this planting and building. Now, really, in some ways, it's really pretty similar to what we were talking about about in terms of a mentor or a supervisor. A mentor or a supervisor. Which role are you in at the time? And if you look up this session number 2, there was an extended Q&A at the end, and a parent asked me about bedtime. They have a child that doesn't like to listen to rules, and she does her own thing, and the mom was asking, what should I do? So I said, is she doing well in school? Does she have good friends? Does she have good values? So she said, yes. She's a great kid. Just she's not that talkative to me. So I said, if you want to, she doesn't go to bed on time. So you can take a bedtime as an example. You can be authoritarian. You can be a supervisor and say, I would encourage you, if you want, look at the end of the full session number 2 to see the exchange. So the woman was discussing this, and I said, look, you can be a supervisor. I can't tell you what to do. But you probably will find out that that's who this child is. Some people just don't do rules very well. I happen to be in that group. So, you become 60 years old, you try to channel it in a positive way. But that's just who the children are. If they're doing well in every area of their life, then lay back. They'll come to you when they're ready. But obviously, they're figuring it out until then. So Rav Wolbe talks about Kriya Shema, V'dibar tabam. The first passion in Kriya Shema, it says V'dibar tabam b'shivtecha b'veisecha. You will speak to them. And the second time it says Lidaber bam. They will do the speaking. So phase 2 is a higher phase where you stop talking, and hopefully they listen because they retain these values that you mentored them with. Just so you see, but I wrote, that's Rav Wolbe's overall thing. So bricks, I wrote on the bottom, bricks don't grow additional layers. They don't grow layers on top of bricks. You pile up bricks. After a while, you stop, and that's it. The walls don't grow. And on the other hand, trees grow for a very long time after you finished your work. And what Rav Wolbe really is explaining is that when you're in authoritarian mode, when you're in supervisor mode, it should be very neat. You might do your house might look more orderly than someone who's authoritative, because they're helping mold the children. But if you're in authoritarian mode, if you're in supervisor mode, sooner or later that role expires when you stop being bigger and stronger, when they become older, when they go through adolescence. And planting, whereas it's much messier and it doesn't go exactly the way you want, and you have to eventually you sit back and you watch the tree grow. So that's the big idea of Rav Wolbe's Binyan. I posted the book before. Last thing, I'm going to leave that last piece of Torah out. I have I'm biased, it's my thought. Feel free to look it up on the YouTube video for session number 2, for full session number 2. I have my take on the words that a father of a bar mitzvah boy says, Baruch Sheptarani Mi'anshi Shalazeh. But what I wrote here is this parenting deep dive about negotiating. If you remember, the original question was how my kid constantly wants to negotiate with me. Now, what should I do? I propose that you teach them how to negotiate with you. Don't assume that they know what to do. How do they know? In other words, if you're dissenting, if a parent says A and you want B, parent says, I want you home at 10 o'clock. Child says, no, I want to come home at 12. So have you taught your children how that is to be communicated? Okay, that's the question. Have you explained to your children, here's how we have these discussions in our home? Now, these are 3 rules that I did with our children and with my students all the years, where I told them, look, if I say 10 o'clock and you want 12, okay, if I say your homework the book report is due on this day and you want it a different day, if I say, here's the dress code and you want to make an exception, so here's what you do. Speak softly. You can't, if you raise your voice to me, I'm not going to yell at you, but I'm just going to tell you, look, Yitzi, I know you're upset right now. It's okay. Take some time. The second you're ready to talk, just come right back. Again, if you lose control of yourself, you're not the boss anymore. Okay? And make a counteroffer, meaning don't tell me no. If I say 10 o'clock, don't say, no, I'm not doing 10 o'clock. Then it's over. We're not going to discuss this anymore until you come back and make me a counteroffer and tell me why it's important. this was again, these were my own rules. You make your own. This is just a template of how to explain to your children how to dissent if they're not in sync with the way you see things. Now, you could make the argument that my parents didn't do this. This sounds like a terrible idea. Why am I giving the enemy help? Why am I? It sounds like I'm helping my kids argue with me. I'm giving them a baseball bat to hit me over the head. No, I propose to you that it's not like that, because if you don't teach them how to dissent, it's normal that, especially as they go through adolescence, it's normal that they're going to disagree with you. If you don't tell them a respectful way to do this, they're going to pick the non-respectful way, and then you're going to get into a whole argument over you know, how dare you, it's chutzpah, you're disrespectful, and you know, or you'll start guilting yourself, like the guy from the first world country never, who's this third world country who doesn't understand electricity. You'll start wondering what you did wrong. I don't know, my son's opening a mouth to me, and you know, what did I do wrong? I remember I'm not laughing, chas v'shalom, parents are in pain. I God forbid, please, please forgive me. I didn't mean it to sound in a derogatory way, but many parents often say things like, you know, I remember I used to argue with my mother, and my grandmother would say, you keep doing this, you'll see your kids are going to do it back to you, and you start crying. And he says, normal, this is what teenagers do. So give them a derech, a path on how to do this with specificity, saying, speak softly, make a counter offer, tell me why. Can I please, I know you said 10 o'clock, can I do 12 o'clock? Because that's when the best time is. 10 and 12 is the most fun. Or all the geeks leave at 10 o'clock, okay? So an authoritarian says, I'm the boss, you have to listen to me. I said 10 o'clock, it'll work as long as you're the supervisor. Authoritative person, a parent, is comfortable enough. This is something that I always tell parents. When parents complain that the kids are negotiating, I say, as long as they're negotiating with you, you're in good shape, because only the boss negotiates. And this is really a compliment. This is a compliment that they're telling you that I know you're the boss. I know I have to listen to you. Please change your mind. Now, you can trust me. I don't know one kid since the beginning of time who argued with their parents like that. Okay? So it's not likely that the kids are going to come and articulate this. You know, Mom, Dad, thank you so much for arguing with me. I appreciate it. I know you're the boss. I know you have to, but that's really what they're telling you. When they come argue with you, if you want to raise at work, you don't go to your peer. You don't go to someone who's lower on the totem pole than you are. You go to your boss. So I propose to you that thinking of it this way empowers you to be able to stand firm, listen, and hopefully get to that authoritative mode, authoritative, right, where you know you're an authority. I know I'm the boss. I know you're negotiating with me. Let's talk it over. And sometimes you'll give in, and sometimes you won't, and sometimes it'll be a little bit of both. Okay? So first session and second session, we were talking, now we're sliding into session 3. I'm trying very hard to stick to my timetable. I'd like to get finished by as close to 45 minutes as we can. So we spoke about the theory of adolescence, why it works, why they behave this way, what the research shows, some effective ways that you can deal with this as parents. We went through those 4 scenarios. I left out some Torah thoughts. I left out some of the deep dive discussion into research. I left out a lot of the anecdotes, you know, the stories that help bring these points out, but I only have 15 minutes. I actually sent out a survey. I sent out a survey right before Shabbos, asking parents to give the participants, I got about 40 responses so far, to give feedback about more stories, less stories. You know, most of the people did want more stories, did want research discussed, and 40 to 60 minutes was the average in terms of, with the most common answers in terms of how long the presentation should be. But I'm determined to do this to help you out, either review or get ready to join our series this Tuesday night. Again, it's this Tuesday night. You can, on the email that I sent out about this, there is instructions of how to sign up for the session, or you can send an email to events, like an event, plural, events at the, right, beginnings with plural, again, .com, and get a link to register for the fourth, fifth, and sixth sessions, again, which will be in successive Tuesday nights. I again want to thank Michael and Estelle Stein for sponsoring this series in memory of their beloved parents and grandparents. Okay, let's get on to module 3. Our daughter, Sara, if you want to, she was really, I'm biased, of course, but she was really fantastic, and I think you'll really get an interesting insight in what it looks like from the part of a customer. Our daughter, Sara Horowitz, our youngest, actually participated in this session with me because I'm talking about, this session is about having your kids seek your guidance. And it's a totally different experience in terms of relationship. How can you get to a place where your kids seek your guidance when they need it most? And when they need it most means when they're getting into trouble. I always say nobody needs guidance from their parents when they get straight A's on their report card. They need guidance when their friends are vaping or getting into trouble or partying at night, or chas v'shalom, God forbid, getting abused, or somebody's crowding their space. That's when they need your help. And we know that it's so hard to confide in adults who love you, like your parents. This talk is about what can you do as parents to get your kids to seek your guidance when they need it most. And we're going to go through it. Again, if you want to watch Sara, she also did during Q&A, she presented with me at certain points during the initial presentation, and we took questions from the folks, whatever, 90 or so folks that were on the call. She was talking about what it's like when you're being raised in such a way. Okay, so let's get through it. Now, let's get to it. Culture in your home. What's the norm of your home? And I encourage you to think about what are the values of your home. And to put it in Stephen Covey's terms, Stephen Covey uses the 70th birthday party instead of Oprah. But the big idea is, he says, you're at your 70th birthday party, one of your kids gets up to speak, one of your grandkids speaks, what would you want them to say? And this is, the first part of this talk is really encouraging you to be reflective and say, what would you like your goals to be? Our home was a place where kids are comfortable hanging out. Our home is a place where we treat each other with respect. Parents to kids, kids to parents. Our home is a place where kids, this is what this session is about. I encourage you to make one of these goals, to think about making one of these goals, a place where kids talk to me. I gave an example of family time and Rabbi Wein's yeshiva and our RV trip with our kids, and something we did with our kids to keep the light on. Sorry, can't do it now. Feel free to look it up, as Yogi Berra used to say. But Casey Stengel, actually, I think. Okay, the process, the experts in doing this, the experts in talking and thinking about planning goals, whether it's for a business, it's your personal life, anything. The experts in this space of thinking and planning and articulating your goals and achieving them say, this is the template. Here's my goal, because why is it important? Therefore, what am I going to do? Okay, I want to lose 10 pounds. That's goal number one. I'd want to lose 10 pounds because it's good for my health, and because I'm 60 years old and my bones are starting to hurt, and 10 pounds less will make the stress less. Therefore, I'm going to walk every day. Therefore, I'm going to go to a gym class. Therefore, I'm gonna, hire a dietitian to work out my meals. So what I want, why I want it, what are you doing about it? Because if you just do if your goal isn't clear, how are you gonna get there? If you don't explain the reason, how's it gonna work? If you don't, and if you don't say what you're doing, then it's a dream, not a goal. Okay, so those are the 3 steps. And I'm going to walk you through how this works as parents. And something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last few years is what is the cost associated with each goal, and are you willing to pay it? In other words, none of these goals come cheap. So are you willing to pay? So here's an example I have. And I did this as an exercise for our parents, the participants, you guys, to, you know, again, if you're a single parent, I stand for you, and kol hakavod, Hashem should give you mazel and bracha. You know, my mother was a single, just if any of you are single parents or doing blended families, my mother was a single mom for 2 years. She remarried, and our parents really blended their families amazingly well. If you're a single parent, really, I stand in awe of your courage. Just stick to it. Just for the record, I do not believe that kids from single parent homes are more at risk of, you know, abandoning religion, getting into trouble. I think kids from unhappy homes are. Now, you might make the case that kids from single parent homes might be more likely to be unhappy, an unhappy environment, perhaps because of the challenges they face. I lost my father. I had to deal with that. It's a big deal, you know, changing. But I believe that if parents have the children's best interest in mind and work all this out, in and of itself, I do not believe that being a single parent, it adds risk in and of itself. But if you're married, I encourage you to do this together. Talk about what your goals are. If you don't talk about them, it's almost impossible that you're going to achieve them. So here's an example I gave. Our home will be a place where our teens and tweens feel comfortable hanging out in. Why? Because we'll parent them better. We'll know who their friends are. I don't want to have to worry where they're going. We don't want them getting into trouble. What's it going to cost you, folks? So during our talk, during the regular session, we went through these, and people, you know, we were unmuting people and people were inputting. You might want to look at that. That's like halfway through session number 3. So it's going to cost you money, right? It'll cost you money because you're going to have to buy all kinds of nash and food, and you might have to buy toys for the house or put up a basketball court in the backyard, or some other things inside. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you privacy. It's going to cost you a silent, you know, serenity at home. They're real costs. It might cost you standards, because if you say we're not having, just tick it off. We don't do, you know, we don't have electronics in our home. So you might find, good for you, but you might find your kids running to homes that do. And that's really complicated. This is an example of what this process looks like. Okay, here I'm going to, again, please refer to video 3 for the whole detail of it. But the goal is our home will be this. Here's why it's important. What are you doing about it? What's the cost of it? Here's an example of what the cost will be if you pick, if you choose to pick having your kids hang out at home. This is what tonight, this talk about. This is module number 3. It's about, if you decide that you want your children to talk to you, what's it going to cost you? Rav Shimon Schwab, I'm going to leave. Rav Shimon Fulker, he said a great word about friendship. Feel free to look it up at the original talk. And this is research. I'm absolutely going to skim through this. The research shows that teens talk to their parents when their parents don't freak out, when there's a close relationship, when there's flexibility, when you spend time together. It doesn't come by itself. You can't be like an absentee parent and just all of a sudden show up and say, talk to me, where there's trust. And there's 5 different studies here. Dr. Aviva Goldstein, who helped me with the research on this, you know, here's the research on the left side. On the right side, it's Mama Lashon, you know, just explained in plain, simple English. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I apologize again. You'll be able to look it up. If you wish to, you can look it up in the original session where I talk more about it. And what I encourage you to think about, this is taken, you know, this is a picture in Colorado. My wife and I had the great pleasure of being in Aspen and Vail for a couple of summers with our children. And this is a runaway ramp. When a truck is going too fast down and is afraid of losing control, they go up this ramp, and their energy, the energy of the truck is expended in this ramp instead of crashing and killing the driver and lots of other people. And what I propose to you, in addition to all the other benefits of having your kids talk to you, this is a runaway truck ramp for when their lives get out of control. And this is so important, because if the kids can't talk to you, how in the world are they supposed to get out of trouble? And again, you can look it up, Times of Israel, No Questions Asked Purim Pickup. This was a piece that I wrote about telling your children, I don't want you drinking on Purim. I don't want you, you know, smoking. I gave an example of Purim. So you tell your children the rules. I don't want you smoking on Purim. I don't want you drinking. I don't want you getting out of control. My suggestion is before they leave your house to just have a quick talk with them and say, listen, sweetheart, you know what I told you. You know what we want. You know what we don't want. If you get in trouble, please call me up. I promise you, I'll pick you up without asking any questions. And there was a very lively exchange about this. Our daughter Sara talked about it. She actually, with my permission, we told a story to the kids about a Purim party that we were terrified of her going to and that we allowed her to attend when she was 15. You really might want to have a look at that. But that's the big idea. And I think, in my opinion, if there's one takeaway from this whole thing, your life matters more than our rules. I think when you tell your children something like this, what you're saying is, I know we gave you rules, but your life matters more. In fact, one of the mothers asked a question about this, and she said, before I got to this part, am I not undermining my own rules? So we talked about it. Our daughter spoke, she spoke. It was really very lively exchange in the Q&A. Again, I encourage you to have a look. It's video number 3. All the videos are on my YouTube channel, Mark Yaakov Horowitz. So if you really want to mentor your kids, here's where it starts coming together. The next talk this coming Tuesday night is, I believe it's June 23rd, is about technology. And I layered this when preparing these classes because now is when we roll up the sleeves. Now that we understand adolescence and we know what's coming and we understand the developmental phases, and we understand the research, and we understand that having a relationship with an open relationship with our children is so important, now you get to deal with all the other stuff. So we're going to talk about the next 3 sessions. We're talking about religion. We're going to be talking about the whole faith issue. What happens if your kids stop davening, they stop learning, they stop, or faith is unraveling. What to do. This coming, as I said, this one is all about technology, how to make the type of rules that your kids will listen to. We're going to be talking about troubleshooting when your kids really get into trouble. So last thought for this session and for this talk, for this shallow dive, if you want to mentor your tweens and teens, and your goal is our home will be a place where our tweens and teens can talk to us about anything, let's talk about the barriers. And again, we had a very lively discussion with the parents, giving feed input about what those barriers are. I have one here, afraid of punishment. And the parents said what you would say if I was able, if I had the time to unmute you. Okay, they're embarrassed to tell us. They're afraid of punishment. I said, are you going to keep that confidentiality? Do you get it? Right? If they feel you don't get it, you don't understand their lives, why would they talk to you? Okay, so there are others also. I propose to you that if you want your children to talk to you, the only way that it really works is if they can have these discussions with you without any of these barriers. And again, this is the review. Okay, our home will be a place where our tweens and teens can talk to us. Why? It'll make us closer. It'll help their personal safety. Remember that thing with the exit, with that ramp, with the truck ramp? And it's the only way we can guide them through their mistakes. Then you got to talk about the barriers. And I absolutely believe that it's doable. Our daughter, let's ask Sara. Now this raises so many questions. Hey, does it ever happen? Does it mean it's okay? There are no consequences. How will they ever learn? Let's ask Sara. Go have a look at it. But the overriding point here, the overriding point is that if you're parenting like this is the ultimate of what Rav Wolbe would say is planting. Now, Rav Wolbe says, and I said it several times during the talk, we must do the building thing. They're not old enough to just do mentoring stuff with them. But I propose to you that your role as a supervisor, as time goes on and as technology gets more ubiquitous, and again, we're going to talk about this Tuesday night, that role in their lives becomes less and less real because, you know, that role has a shelf life. I hope you found this helpful, folks. I really encourage you, go through this, study it, send links of these talks to your friends so you can talk about it together, so you can help each other when things get challenging. And I hope you found this helpful. I hope it's a good review if you have been in these classes. If you haven't been, I hope it's a good psicha, it's a good opening. Talk to your friends about it. By the way, research shows that one of the best ways to retain knowledge is that probably, I think the best way is that you write it. If you write about it, if you think about it, but if you explain it to somebody else, it's one of the best ways to do it. So good luck, hatzlacha. I really, really, really encourage you to continue growing in parenting. I hope you can join us at the upcoming sessions. The first one again, the fourth one, and the next one is this Tuesday night. You can send an email to events@thebrightbeginnings.com to receive the information. Thanks so much for listening. Be well.